I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. As we record this, news breaks that suspicious packages, potentially explosive devices, have been sent to the home of Bill and Hillary Clinton in Chappaqua, New York, as well as to Barack Obama in Washington, D.C., and in recent days to Time Warner, an office of Time Warner, as well as George Soros. Bill, this is a breaking news story. We do not even know for sure that these were explosives, but certainly the Secret Service is involved. The FBI is involved. They're treating it as a very serious matter. President Trump, through his spokesman, Sarah Sanders, has condemned this disgusting act that threatens these individuals. And Bill, I guess I'm just want to ask you, what's the appropriate response for people on the right to these attacks of people on the left?
It is utterly 100% reprehensible. It violates every principle that we've ever stood for. My entire reason for becoming a conservative was because that seemed to me where the truth lied. And if the truth lies there, then you will win eventually if you can just simply speak the truth. I cannot condemn something like this in strong enough terms. This person is not a Republican, they're not a conservative, and they're certainly not a patriot. If you think political assassination is in the spirit of the American nation, then you have a great deal of learning to do.
Now, Bill, I'm sure the argument will be made, perhaps has already been made, but I'm going to ask the question, what role do you think overheated political militaristic rhetoric may have played or does play on an ongoing basis in incidents like this of what I can, at this point, term political terrorism?
Yeah, I'll call it political terrorism. And I'll be honest with you, I don't want to define terrorism down, but since we're on the subject, harassing people out of their dinner meals in a restaurant is a form of political terrorism. It's thuggery. It's the use of violence. It's the use of personal harm. And it's the use of personal tactics to intimidate individuals of a certain political persuasion. I don't want to water down my condemnation of it by saying, well, this happens too, but it does happen too. They send ricin to a bunch of people during the Kavanaugh hearings, and they sent they hunted Republicans in a softball field looking for Republicans to kill. I'm not trying to bring up a score, and I'm certainly not trying to say, well, they did it too. It is reprehensible. It is disgusting. It is un-American. And it is not only un-American, it's the end of civilization. We live under a rule of law. And if we are not willing to accept the law and accept the consequences of elections either way, then we don't deserve the republic and the freedom that's been handed to us. And if the person who committed these acts is somehow considering themselves a patriot for doing so, you have got an awful lot of explaining to God to do. You need to be in federal prison, and you need to stay there for the rest of your life. It is intolerable for this kind of thing to happen in America, in any civilized society. It is absolutely intolerable. And if it turns out that they find the person that did this, and if it turns out this person is a conservative or a Tea Party member or something, then for the first time in my adult life, I will be deeply ashamed to have that name attached to me. With that said, I think that the universal response among Republicans should be, must be, utter rejection of this individual as somebody who not only does not understand our principles, but actually understands the inverse of what we believe in.
Given the fact that we know that there are perhaps millions of people out there who are not mentally sound or who have some character flaws that could push them over the edge at any given moment, what obligation do we have as conservatives? Or I guess I want to ask it this way, not what obligation do we have as conservatives, but how will we know when we have gone too far in our own rage rhetoric, so to speak?
If we start calling for the bombings of Democratic Party members, and actually the threshold comes way before then, Scott. If we ever start justifying this, then we've lost our way.
There's a final question I want to ask you about this because it occurs to me as you were talking about...
Can I add one thing? Can I add one thing to the thing
you
mentioned before? Because one of the things that I've often tried to do in the case of school shootings and things like this is, look, no one's going to come out and defend a school shooting. No one's going to say, well, this is okay because of this. No. All I'm saying is that sometimes, given the the volume of news and this barrage of 24-hour news and so on, all I try to do sometimes in a situation like that or some other natural catastrophe is to provide some sense of perspective. That's all I'm trying to do. If I see an evil, and it's a great evil, and it looks to me to be this big relative to the whole society, and it gets blown up bigger and bigger and bigger, me trying to put that evil back into perspective is not the same thing as saying this isn't evil. This needs to be eradicated. So let's just get that straight. But what you said actually needs to be borne in mind to the degree that we should not look at this as a societal issue so much as a personal one. We have 320 million people with enormous freedoms, unbelievable freedoms to do just about anything in this country. And for one set of packages to show up with the rhetoric and the political climate as heated as it is an indication to me that while this person needs to be in jail, the country as a whole is remarkably sound, because this kind of thing in other countries, what's happening it doesn't just happen. Political assassinations occur all throughout the world. And we just need to keep in mind that when we see something as horrific as this, as inexcusable as this, then all we can do as a people is say that person needs to be found and arrested. The rest of us need to take it as a moral lesson and as a wake-up call that things are getting a little too hot in this country on both sides, but especially keep in mind that with 320 million people, one person doing something like this is not indicative of a society that is falling apart or deserves to.
You mentioned a little earlier political figures being run out of restaurants. I saw a headline recently and a blurry picture of Nancy Pelosi having the same sort of thing happen to her. I'm wondering, Bill, if you think that there's any chance that this kind of outward manifestation of an inward division and anger has any possibility of drawing people together across political lines when we realize that there's risk on both sides if our advocates take our ideas too far and, manifest an inner turmoil in an outward violent act? Can this bring us together?
Well, I certainly hope so. I've been saying for quite a while now that when you are fighting a dishonorable opponent, you have to fight dishonorably. What they did to Kavanaugh is, to me, an indication that this is not a fight about reason. It's not a fight about logic. It's a fight about emotion, and it's a fight about personal attacks and so on. And I've said repeatedly that these kind of things need to be answered in kind to the degree that you provide some deterrence to this by having it simply not work. But I have never, ever advocated violent action of any kind against any individual. And it's funny, somebody emailed me the story about how Chris Evans, who played Captain America, kind of hinted that if he had this infinity glove, I didn't even see the movie, but if he had this glove of power, he would use it against conservatives, And I was driving home telling my wife about this and saying, this is kind of a rough thing, to have Captain America say if he had a glove of infinite power, he'd use it to basically kill all the conservatives. And she said, well, you use it to kill all the liberals. And I actually stopped the car because that was the first time, I think, since I've been married, that I realized there's a big part of me you're misunderstanding. If I had absolute power and absolute impunity, I would not harm a hair on anybody's head. I wouldn't want a particle of physical harm to come to Nancy Pelosi or Blasey Ford. I wouldn't want a particle of physical harm to come to Barack Obama or any of them. And I'd love to tell you that it's because of my advanced moral state, and maybe that moral state is a result of what I'm about to say. But what my fascination with history has shown me is that power, they say absolute power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's completely true. Nobody ever talks about the process. Everybody talks about it happening, and it does happen. Nobody talks about how it happens. How does it happen? Well, everybody who gets power starts out trying to do something good. Most people want power so they can improve situation for how they perceive the world. Hitler thought he was improving Germany. I didn't think he had the right idea. I still don't think he had the right idea, but certainly in the beginning, His desire to recover Germany's prestige was what drove him into power. He was rotten to the core from the beginning. But there are many good people who go into situations where they're given power, and the selection, the exercise of power puts you in a bubble where large numbers of people are telling you that everything you do is right, and you begin to drift further and further and further away from reality, and then you start to drift further and further away from fundamental humanity. And this is why this kind of thing needs to be said, and said so forcefully. It is an absolute foundational principle of mine that no one who disagrees with me politically suffers any kind of harm in terms of physical harm. They don't suffer any kind of criminal harm unless they've committed crimes, but the crime is not disagreeing with me. If you committed perjury or espionage, that's a different story. It's not a crime to disagree with me. You shouldn't have to go to jail for that, or re-education camps, or be crazy or anything. The consequences of disagreeing with me should be that you lose a vote among other people. It means I did a better job of convincing people of what I think is true than you did. And you losing a vote, a peaceful vote, should be the maximum amount of punishment inflicted upon you. And it'll do you some good too, because it'll mean you'll have to put a better argument together next time. And I can't say this strongly enough. When I talk about things like fighting back and fighting dirty, I am talking about using the same political weapons that are being used against us by the left. And I was really quite shocked to hear that from my wife. And she was, I think, shocked and impressed to see the vehemence of my reply, which wasn't yelling and screaming at her. It was literally pulling the car over and saying, honey, there's something you're really missing here, and you can understand why she might feel that way, I guess. But she comes from a totalitarian country, Scott. She's Russian, and this is how things are done in places like that. You win elections by killing the people who present a genuine threat to you, and Vladimir Putin has done this, and all of the czars, including Putin, have done this. And we just don't think that way here. I can't stress this strongly enough. I'll say it one more time. I do not, I have not, and I will not ever, ever condone or even wish or even secretly hope for any kind of physical violence or any other kind of non-political punishment against the people I disagree with politically. And when I say political punishment, all I mean is they get voted out of office.
Making the case 5 days a week with the power of his words. This is Bill Whittle Now. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com who contribute $9.95 a month for that membership. And what they're doing is really trying to make this persuasive case to their friends and neighbors around the country and across the globe, frankly. If you'd like to join this citizen producer crew, this team of producers and distributors of this kind of messaging, you can do that at BillWhittle.com. For the members at BillWhittle.com, for Bill Whittle himself, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.